And is Rich LeBombard with us? I'm not sure about Rich. Okay, and we have fire department here with us. Hi, guys, thank you. All right, next I'm gonna call for an approval of the agenda. Do we have any additions to today's agenda? Okay, can I call for a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
This is Marcy. I'll move to accept the agenda as presented.
Okay,
Seconded.
Okay,
Second, that was Richard.
okay, presented by Marcy and seconded by Richard. Brenda Marcy,
Yes.
okay, Kathy,
Yes.
thank you. Cindy,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Richard.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to approval of minutes. Do I have any changes to the minutes from the last meeting? If there are no changes, can I call for a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Ken. I'd move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Ken. Second?
Second. Second by Cindy.
Okay, second by Cindy, thank you. And for our third roll call in 5 minutes, Brenda Marcy?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to move on to public comments at this time. We would welcome any member of the public to comment, limited to today's agenda topics and 3 minutes or under. Do we have any takers? I don't see anyone. Does anyone else see Hadley or anyone see any members of the public? Okay, I don't. Hadley, you don't see anybody, do you?
Nope,
Okay,
no raised hands.
all right, moving on. I just want to say today our goal is to further refine the working designs, the working schematic designs that C2AE is presenting. So I would just ask members of the committee to weigh in on your preferences or concerns. Larry and Emily will be leading the discussion and can answer questions as we go. So I'm going to hand it over to Larry Fox.
Holly, just one thing. This is Joe Fry.
Yes.
You have to go at 2:30 today. Have another appointment. So
Okay.
I just want to let you know.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Okay, thanks everyone, or good to see you all. It's quite a, looks like we have pretty much everybody in attendance. That's good to see. I did just share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. Just pulled up the agenda. And I do want to mention too, in addition to Emily, we also have Tyler Rule from our team who's joining us from the Lansing office. You can see him there. So he's working on, he is a road and trail designer. So he has been working with me closely and a couple other folks on vetting all of these alternatives. So I invited him to participate today if as needed. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to run through the options. We want to talk about the different aspects of each option. We do now have a preliminary cost opinion that we can review. And at the end of the meeting as well, we have to present also a very rough preliminary funding plan that then I can share in hard copy after the meeting, but it's just something we were able to kind of put together today based on getting the cost estimates out the other day. And so we want to cover that. And then also we do want to cover the public information meeting, open house, talk about that a little bit and how that will, your thoughts on how we should conduct that. Emily, anything you can think of to add to that? All right, so let's get started right into talking about the alternatives, I think for Joe's sake, if we don't mind, let's skip to the very north, well, to the township sections and go from there. So everyone should have not only a copy of these preliminary maps, they should also have a route description document that goes along with that to try to give a little clarity to each of those segments and what we're looking at. And then you should have also got the preliminary cost opinions. It looks like this. So I can only share one portion of my screen at a time. So we'll work through this the best we can. So starting in the township. Okay, township border starting at Maple Street, and first segment then Maple Street to Old Allegan Road. Now I recognize we've done a little bit in getting these kind of the drawings more put together to be pretty intuitive as to which cross sections apply to which section. At least we've got them on the same page now. I know there's still some refining we have to do, and also in linking the sections with the cost opinions and alternatives. So still some work to do there, but I think this is getting towards where we want to be. So in this section of roadway, so this is township jurisdiction, which means Allegan County Road Commission. In this section of roadway, we have three distinct sections based on the existing topography. The first is closest to Maple Street. I'm going to zoom in here. We have an embankment that's on the west side of the trail, northwest side of the proposed trail. And we also have some dwellings that encroach pretty closely to the right of way. So this steep embankment coupled with these dwellings and the limited right of way is going to require that we have some type of retaining wall structure in order to fit this trail within the right of way and keep our 5-foot separation. Okay, so I'm going to zoom to that typical cross section here. So this is one that would apply here, basically maintaining the roadway as it is, having at least the 5-foot separation, but greater where we can do that. And as you can see how the embankment impacts the design and maximum cross slopes of the trail being 2% in our required clear zone. So this typical applies to that section of roadway highlighted in yellow. Any questions on that? Okay. Next section, looks like we have the topography and room to do a true separated at-grade trail. So this is basically your standard 10-foot trail, 2-foot clear zone, greater than 5-foot separation from the roadway, similar to a lot of portions of the trail to the north. The northerly section then within the right of way is pretty much all wetland right off the edge of the roadway. So in this case, we are proposing a boardwalk, typical cross section for that area. Again, being a minimum of 5-foot clear from the edge of shoulder, but probably able to get back further away from the roadway from that. Any questions or discussion about this section? We really don't have any alternates here. It's just a matter of the only alternate might be, trying to get a permit to fill a wet area and extend the trail that way. But the likelihood is it's would be a difficult road to haul. Okay. I'm going to then.
Larry, can I just real quick, when you talk about boardwalk, is it always wood?
Holly, that's a good question. And typically we have in the past, that's been pretty much our option. Now you can use recycled materials like Trex and, other decking type materials. But we do have information on a precast concrete structure, but we don't have good pricing on it. It's fairly new and we haven't been able to attain actual installed costs. But
Okay.
it's certainly something we would want to look at in design, because potentially the maintenance on that could be significantly less. So it's something where during design, you could bid this as an alternate to the timber boardwalk and make decisions from that.
Okay, so just with lumber prices, that it sounds like you are actively researching alternates.
Yeah, so we understand two things about timber boardwalks. One is their maintenance problems or issues, certainly requiring maintenance. And then the other is cost.
Right.
Right.
And for the township, we want to be sensitive of as much as possible. So I'm glad you're looking at options for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and obviously to limit the length as much as we can. We I think it's about 200 feet in that section. Okay, so I'm going to
Larry, this is John Adams. Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
I noticed the per foot cost of the boardwalks varies by section. Is that just kind of how it sets on the ground that alters that, or?
Yeah, partly. So let me explain that a little bit. So it varies when we have the at-grade boardwalk, which will show some of the sections where we're actually matching the grade on one side and have a railing on the other side. So we deducted $50. We've got $50 a foot more for where you require two rails as opposed to one. So that's the difference between $750 and $800 in one section.
Okay.
And then for the section that goes through the park, where we also have a bridge section, we basically combine the bridge and boardwalk together, and that price we have at $900 a foot.
Thanks.
Okay. So yeah, that's the reasoning behind that. So Maple to Old Allegan, our cost estimate for that section, including the retaining wall, boardwalk, and at-grade trail, is $450,000. And these are numbers without contingencies yet, so keep that in mind. Okay. I hope I'm trying not to go too fast, but I know we've been over this before. Okay, so this is the northerly section at North Street. And so we've talked about this before. We had some other options on the table, and Joe informed us earlier this week that we could focus on this option that crosses through the park. And so we have done that. So this section along North Street, we've got a nice area for a separated trail, the old railroad grade that's a little ways off the roadway, so we get some good separation. So this is your standard at grade trail. Then the section here where we have to cross the creek and the wetlands would be boardwalk / short bridge. So your typical timber boardwalk section. Again, we can evaluate alternatives. Then through the rest of the park, we have just a at-grade trail through the woods, basically, clearing and grading. Provide a very nice, I think, experience in crossing through the park. Then this is still up for discussion somewhat. Holly and I talked about it, but this is the 66th Street route out to Holland Street that changed from Cemetery Road, which makes a lot of sense. It's also no inhabitants along there, at least that are alive. And so the potential to put a separated trail along there is what we have shown and what we costed. Now that kind of assumes that 66th Street is a typical county road, and I'm not sure of that, where we would have 66 foot of right of way and the ability to get off the road a little bit. So I don't know, Craig or Joe, if you guys know if that's a county road and if this is possible, or if it's possible on the cemetery side, we certainly would need to know that there are no graves that are going to be impacted by a trail.
Yeah, Larry, I don't know if that's platted in there or not. I guess that would probably determine what the right of way width is.
Okay. Something we may need to look into a little further. And if we don't believe a separated trail is necessary or warranted here, we could just go to a shared use roadway because there are no homes and very little traffic. the only drawback to that is, as I mentioned before, as far as trust fund funding, they do not participate in shared use roadways, and I think the preference would be to have a continuous separated trail, but that doesn't rule anything out. So I guess, go ahead. Somebody was going to talk.
This is Joe Fry. I can verify with our sexton, where the platted spots are there in the cemetery, just to, if we look at that further down the line.
Okay. So I guess on this group, should we proceed with the cost for a separated trail, assuming that we would be able to get the right of way and then could revert to a shared use roadway? Or should we just go to a shared use roadway? Those are basically the two options. This one means there's more cost involved, but if it rules out, then going back to a shared use roadway actually reduces cost. Whereas vice versa, if you go in with a shared use roadway and then decide, I'd really like separated, now we're talking more cost and adding to funding, which is very difficult to do. So adding the separated trail at this point is a little more conservative in the funding aspect.
Larry, this is John Adams. I don't know what the right of way is. There are homes on that west side there. I guess it's the west side. They're back a ways. There's some new landscaping and things in there. I don't know. Only a couple of homes, I think. I don't know what their response would be since it's a new route. Those are not people I've had any conversations with. Just an observation on the east side. Obviously it's clean because there are no homes there, but there are some large trees, and you do have the issue with the cemetery. When we were going to consider going through that road, that's actually, you can see it goes through the cemetery. At one point we were considering that. MDOT said they would not fund anything through the cemetery. So obviously it can encroach on that property. I don't think that they would have an issue, just observations. But
I think I would lean towards a shared roadway because it's such a sparsely traveled road and it's quite beautiful. I don't know that you would need to, I know that the preference is to have the separated trail, but it seems that there would be enough room on that road to have both cars and a trail.
Kind of agree with that, but I do think future, and I don't know the township's plans, but that could develop one day and we'll wish we had done the separated, maybe. Things are happening fast these days in terms of development, so.
Good point, Kathy.
This is Joe Fry. We can review the cemetery property itself. So if, part of this review process is, are there any graves within that space to put in the separated trail? And if there is space, then we can choose not to put it in right now with the knowing that that is an option. So we can work to confirm that. And then that way, down the line, if, we want to put in a paved trail there, we have that option and know if we can or not, because we won't be expanding the cemetery right there due to any closer in that area of the cemetery.
Hey, Larry, this is Craig. I just did a quick check and it appears that that's just a section line road. So we should have 66 feet of right of way. I don't believe there's any ditches through there. I think that's extremely sandy soil. So there's a potential that could go within the road right of way still, which means you wouldn't need to get any easements.
Okay, thank you.
Larry, I'd like to hear from Brenda and Cindy, what they think, since this is in their jurisdiction and what they think their board would, what preference their board might have, if any, because ultimately that board will have to approve it.
I think that I would lean towards Holly's initial comment that it's so sparsely traveled that a shared road would be the most reasonable way to address it. And it would be maintained just like a road. It wouldn't have to be plowed separately. And I guess that would be my preference.
And it's probably not a lot of traffic. But I think, yeah, the cost will be a big factor in how that all works out. Am I on?
Yep.
Okay.
Larry, what are the standard, I don't know, what do you do for a shared use? Because we won't want any striping or anything on the road. It's already only 20 or 22 feet wide.
Yeah, so, right, it's not paved shoulders, it's basically a shared roadway. And you can put what are called sharrows, the shared use arrows on the roadway, the emblems. But basically, typically, it's just signage that indicates, that the road needs to be shared. So
Okay. I'm not sure how my board would feel about that. I know before I was really involved in the previous discussions, I know this came up, and I don't know if John remembers anything on how that went, but I think they were a little hesitant to do that. I guess I'm just not sure that that's going to be an option the road commission would be willing to approve. So hard to say at this point.
Okay, well, that's important to know.
So Craig,
This is-
are you saying because it is a cemetery road, what specifically is the issue?
No, it's not a cemetery road. It's a public road, just like any other road would be. I'm not sure. Like I said, I think this discussion came up in the past, and I don't know how my board felt about it.
Okay.
So I'm just
So
There
there,
are
throwing that out
other
there that
roads.
this may not fly.
There are other roads in the township that are signed, share the road.
Well, that's a legal requirement anywhere. A bike can ride on any public road and legally take up a full lane of traffic if they choose to. But we don't have any other designated trail routes like this on, that are directing people to the roadway.
Okay, so I would suggest at this point, just from what I'm hearing, and Holly, you can poll whoever, but perhaps we leave it at this for now. And then Craig can poll his board to see if it's a possibility to use a shared use roadway as far as the road commission is concerned, because that will be important. And then, we can take, we don't have to have a final decision at this point. We're still taking this information to the public for their feedback. So I think we can show them, perhaps add the alternate as shared use roadway to this section and kind of present it in that fashion. And that way Joe can check on the cemetery. Craig can check with his board on shared use roadway, and we'll have it covered.
Yep, that sounds good.
I have
Hey,
one
Larry.
question for Craig, and that is, how strict is your board? Do they have cut and dried rules, or can you go in and sell it to them that we need to get this option or both options due to the difficulty of this trail for the last 3 years? Is there any influence you have, or is it that strict?
I would say they're going to decide what they decide, no matter what I say.
Really?
In something like this is more their purview. It's not a what I would say is a management issue. It's a more of a policy type issue here. So, I don't know. I would say overall, my board really doesn't want to have anything to do with trails.
Oh,
I mean, we're we're working with the groups that want to do them. But we just really don't want any responsibility, any cost implications, any long-term liability, any thing that could cause a problem for the road commission, I guess, so.
Okay.
Larry, this is John Adams. First of all, Craig, I don't recall any objections to on the road, but I don't know if it was ever reviewed by your board. I just have no recollection. One question about the shared road option. If we go that way, it's my understanding you'd have to have a sidewalk for pedestrians to accompany that. Is that accurate, or?
I don't believe that is, John. I have not heard that requirement before. I know you brought it up before.
Yeah, we went down this route on a different section, and that's what we were told. Again, I don't know for certain for that, but that would obviously impact the homeowners to a little bit larger degree. But
Emily, you want to weigh in on that? Oh, not hearing you. Your mute's off, but we're not hearing you. Nothing. And you're thinking that was the trust fund or TAP, John?
I believe it was TAP. Again, you have to, I guess the concept was you have to provide for walkers, for true pedestrians, and shared use road is fine for bikes, but you need to take care of people who are walking. That was my recollection. And obviously a sidewalk is something that's not covered in terms of the funding, I believe, as well. So that's a complication.
All right, we will verify that. But my belief is no. So,
okay.
Emily, give me a thumbs up or down. Oh, she must have signed off saying by can.
Well,
okay.
If it's a non-motorized trail, it's made for multiple uses, including walkers, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I've understood the shared use roadway, is that is for pedestrians as well as bikes as well as vehicles, and that's the intent of the share of the road.
Okay, well, we can verify.
Yeah,
okay.
let's fill in the blank on this section of road. I appreciate everyone's honesty and feedback on that, and let's just get some more variables and continue in the future, and let's keep going.
Okay, so go to the cost on this one. We had $324,350. Again, construction only, no contingency or engineering. What we'll do is we'll separate this out to the park section versus the roadway section, and that way, we'll be able to show those alternatives a little differently. Okay, anything more on the sections in the township?
I don't have any comment this time. So far, what is being presented looks, from who I've talked to, with a section down by Maple Street, it looks like the most straightforward, and the section in going through the park and the cemetery section is a little bit more nature trail. I know of talking with different individuals at the township, they do like being able to go through nature as a part of the trail system. So, but that's all the comments I have, and I will be logging off. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, Holly, should we move on back to the southerly section?
Yes.
Okay. And Emily, why don't you test your mic this time? Are you back? No. Okay.
Larry, just a real quick question. If we go through the park and the cemetery section, does that actually score higher on our grant application if you have a natural feature?
We did ask them about that, and they say there's no real scoring on it, although they do, I think it's preferable. So it doesn't necessarily get you a better score, but they believe it provides a better hiking experience, and I guess it could count towards it a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, we did not get a definitive answer on that, which is difficult. Okay, so going back to the southerly section, I know this is still a little confusing the way we have this laid out perhaps, but I'm going to zoom in here. So we have 3 distinct sections that we're talking about that are shown below, 2 options, 3 sections. The first section we call the South Bridge approach. So it's between Washington Street and the actual elevated portion of the bridge where the curb and gutter changes to just elevated sidewalk. So, you know, the roadway doesn't change much, but that's a distinction. And then in the north section, the same thing. So we have the south approach, the bridge itself, and then the northerly approach is what we're calling it, which our typical cross section is for this area where we have the separated trail behind the curb. Okay, so just to kind of clarify that. And then we have 2 options that we'll go through. Okay, so we've talked about this before. We've tried to refine these and then added both approaches so you can see what's going on for the whole thing. So the 3-lane configuration was our attempt at maintaining 3 full lanes of traffic that are 11 foot wide as a minimum. Okay, so that's what this does. And there's not a lot of difference between the South Bridge approach and the bridge section itself. The only difference is being that we gain just a little bit of width because we can count the gutter pan as part of our road lane surface in those sections, whereas you don't have gutter pan in the other section. So it just changes, I think it's a foot overall. So basically what we can do is on the southerly approach, have 3 11-foot lanes and then a half a foot, what we're calling shoulder, you know, whatever you want to have. And then on the bridge, we have 3 11-foot lanes. On the east side, we have the elevated sidewalk, which forms the limit of the northbound lane. On the southbound lane, we need some type of separation from the roadway. And so what we're proposing here or showing is a delineator. We're giving that 1 foot of space. It doesn't necessarily require a foot, but just for demonstration purposes. And then our 2 foot clear zone, an 8 foot non-motorized path, and 2 foot clear zone to this sidewalk. So really we've got 12 feet of clear area for bicyclists basically, plus an adjacent sidewalk for pedestrians. And that works out through the south end. And then this, of course, at Washington Street would connect to the existing Douglas Trail at that end. Did someone just say something?
Oh, it's just Emily. I just
Yes.
fixed my microphone.
Yes, we can. Thank you. Anything you want to say now?
I'm so sorry. I had to turn my computer off. I don't know why it does that sometimes. You know, I just wanted to add that when I left, I think it was John that said that MDOT would require a sidewalk. And that is true. They will require a sidewalk if you do it on road bike, like for the bike. So the only way around that would be to end the actual tap application at the park with a couple parking spaces there, like a trailhead. That would be the only way to get around that.
Okay, so basically we'd be replacing the cost of a separated trail with the cost of a sidewalk, 5 foot sidewalk. So gaining some, but not an awful lot in terms of cost.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you for clarifying that.
Sorry about that.
Okay, any questions on these 2 sections of this 3-lane roadway option? All right, I'm going to pull
Larry,
up. Yeah.
Larry, this is John. I actually did have a couple of questions. Do you see any issues in lining up with the existing Douglas Trail? The size of the trail is a little bit different as you come into Douglas.
No, I do not, because we've got that intersection buffer separation and it's only a 2 foot difference. So I really don't see much issue there.
My other question was, how do you feel about the delineators in terms of the safety of the trail users and the bikers? You think that's acceptable in terms of separation from a safety issue, or?
I think it's acceptable to propose in our application and then see if MDOT wants to require anything in addition to that. That's as well as I can put it. Emily, it's not a hard and fast rule, and you read the requirements and the AASHTO standards. And so it all depends on their interpretation. I feel that it's sufficient, especially if some kind of reflectorization or other thing on the delineator for the traffic.
May I follow up on that with a question, Larry?
Yeah.
With the delineator system used by Douglas on the south side of it, as you come off the bridge there, which is like a curve and then small 6-8 inch delineators, I don't know how long they are, on top of that, would that be something that could be approved for the entire bridge?
If you have a curb, potentially, the way I did read through the AASHTO requirements again, and I believe that they would like vertical separation to be a minimum height of a guardrail height. And so a 6-inch delineator on a 6-inch curb or a 1-foot curb, probably not. One thing I'm trying to avoid here is the cost and complication of putting a concrete curb in the middle of the bridge. We've got drainage issues, you've got cost issues, you've got structural issues. So putting a curb on the bridge can be done, but of course, then you're cutting pavement, putting concrete adjacent to asphalt. You have to have at least some breaks in it to allow drainage through. So if we can do it without curb, I think that would be better. But we do need something that is going to be, I think, more than just a hint of a separation, more than just pavement marking.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I did some research around the country on like places like this where you just have a limited area from an existing bridge, and 3-foot separation was always the recommended amount with a delineator that has some height to it. And actually, typically it did not have a curb or anything like that. It was just a delineator that came straight off the ground. So what MDOT will require, they won't tell you anything specific. They'll review it. And you just have to come in with why you think it's the best solution. So, and I think, doing the research around the country of what has worked is in our favor. So.
Rich, did you want to?
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, Rich LeBombard had his hand up, I think.
Sorry, Richard. I do have a question about the delineators. They're bolted to the bridge deck, I assume. So what kind of impact does that have on the bridge deck in the long run?
Yeah, I don't think it would be significant. There's a couple different kinds of delineators. They also have some that are recessed that you cut into the pavement. So they're kind of made that you can remove them in the wintertime and plow over them. But I don't think that would be nearly as significant of an impact as a curb. So I think it's certainly doable, and it's just a surface type mount, so it's not like affecting the structural integrity of the bridge.
Okay, and then are these the type of delineators that they will, if they get hit by a car, they'll pop back up?
Yes, anything we would use there, I think, has to be some flexibility to it, just because we are so close to the lane. If we're going to put something rigid in there, it's going to have to be more like crash-worthy rigid.
Okay, I have one more question since I'm occupying the time here. John mentioned the alignment with the Douglas side of things. You said there was a 2-foot difference. Is it that the Douglas side is 2 foot wider, or the Douglas side is 2? Okay, so we're going to be a little bit wider. So we have a little bit of a traffic shift coming through the intersection.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
From the plans I've seen, you 14 feet is what you have south of the intersection.
Okay, and you're not going to propose any kind of adjustment then to our existing infrastructure there?
Not at this point. We're going to have to look at that intersection in a little more detail and come up probably with a drawing for our submittal, just to show that. But I don't, from what I recall, I don't think that it's any big revisions are required.
Okay, thank you.
Larry, one more question back to the delineator. What's the spacing requirement of those things? In other words, how many of them are going to be on that span on the bridge?
You know, there's no distinct spacing requirement that AASHTO provides. So we have to provide something that is reasonable. And so that can be determined. I mean, it could be every 100 feet. It could be probably not a lot further than that. So I don't know how many hundreds of feet we're talking about here. But yeah, I can't give straight up answer.
But it's not like every 6 feet.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that's something that Ken's concerned about is the view on the bridge if you've got a bunch of these, one after the other.
Understood. And yeah, all I can say is there's going to be trade-offs no matter what we do.
And Larry and I have we talked about maybe doing something creative, color-wise, artistically, something, which we can get into later. Richard, did you have, Richard Donovan, did you want to weigh in? And then I'll loop back to Rich LeBombra.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. I was going to suggest that Larry or Emily could maybe provide us with examples of the kind of delineators they have in mind, because I think aesthetics is important here. It's the kind of thing where members of the public may see it and have a stronger reaction to that than they do to the, some of the more technical infrastructure details that we've been talking about. And personally, I do too. I have
You are absolutely right, Richard.
Yeah, I have a negative reaction to some of those plastic delineators. And also, we were advised by MDOT previously that we had to have vertical separation and we should consider a crash-worthy example. But I understand, Larry, you're saying that's not necessarily required. But I guess I'm a little nervous that you're going to have the bikers riding along, with just a flexible delineator there between them and the southbound shoulder. But I understand your concern about having to put a curb there too. I don't know what the right answer is.
There is no 100% right answer, but as Emily said, we need to propose something that we think makes the most sense and provides safety. I'm going to tell you something you're probably not going to like to hear is because not only do we need to consider the bicycle safety, but we also need to consider that this is a roadway and we need to meet AASHTO standards with the roadway. I mean, we can't change the roadway so that now we've got a problem with the safety of the vehicular traffic. And so probably my recommendation with those delineators is going to be a delineator that's reflectorized that would meet the Michigan Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is probably what you're talking about that you don't like. But that is going to provide the safety. It's got reflectivity. It's made to flex with traffic and come back up. So, I mean, unless we can come up, if we had more room, we could go back and put in plantings or, those kinds of things. Not on the bridge, probably, regardless, but a different type of delineator. But because of the tightness here, that's my feeling.
Well, couldn't we do different colors? I know those delineators come in all different colors. Possibly we could do a road mural where the trail is. I mean, we could do something visually that Saugatuck that visually delineates the road from the trail.
And I think perhaps like in between a reflectorized delineator, you could have alternating types of delineators that might have some art on it or colors or something like that. Okay. So we need to provide the road and path safety, and then consider aesthetics above and beyond that.
We'll keep working on that. Rich LeBombard and Ryan both wanted to weigh in, I think.
Nothing for me. I dropped my hand.
Okay, Ryan?
Thanks, Holly. Good afternoon, everyone. A question for Larry, just from a process standpoint. When you submit the application, is it possible to include a design alternative if the preference is to just go with the delineators and not the raised surface or curb? Or does MDOT prefer that we just go in with one design and they're going to give us feedback and then we resubmit with their comments in mind?
Emily and I talked about this earlier today because we knew this is an important part of the discussion. So I think our suggestion is that we pick what we think is the best alternative to proceed with and submit that to MDOT in the fall. And then they will typically come back with suggestions or modifications that they'd like you to make. So potentially you could do a resubmittal if you had to with a different alternative in January and still then, be in line with the trust fund funding, or it might just be nothing changes with that initial application to MDOT. It's just maybe some refining or tweaking. Emily, why don't you add to that?
No, I agree. In general with MDOT, if it's something that meets their goals, they're gonna not just tell you no, resubmit. They typically will say, we don't like this element. Can you provide some supplemental materials or address this, like your separation doesn't meet what we think is necessary. And then we'd come back to a meeting like this and talk about, well, what else can we do? So I have seen them say no, but that's usually because they don't support a project altogether. Usually you have time to make some changes.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Okay, anybody else? Okay.
Okay, so that's just one of the alternatives. And then for this same alternative, basically once we get onto the north approach, as I showed you on the plan view, this alternative, then we would take it off the road behind the curb. So we would have a 5-foot minimum separation from the face of the curb to our edge of pathway that would provide our required separation requirement. And this can be a planting area. We need to keep this 2 foot clear of any obstructions for bicyclists, but this whole area can be green space and plantings in, the 3 foot area. I will note that there is a very steep embankment that comes off the side here, and that we're going to be pushing the limit of, where that embankment starts. So we're trying to avoid having to do any kind of retaining wall or sheet piling here. So we think that we can fit this 5 foot area without adding retaining wall, but we will require a fence or rail at the top of the slope for bicyclists and pedestrians. And let's see, what do I want to say about that? Oh, that we have that this varies. This can widen if some areas we have more width here. We can push it back a little further from the roadway and provide a little more green space area, which would be our goal. Okay, that's that alternative. The second alternative for crossing the bridge for the north section is identical, no change. We're not changing the roadway at all. So for the south approach and then the bridge itself, so this was the 2-lane configuration previously talked about. It provided 2 lanes during the bridge. At the south approach at Washington, there's a short left turn lane southbound that then provides 2 11-foot lanes, a 10-foot center turn lane, and then a 14-foot we're calling non-motorized path and emergency vehicle lane. So in this option, this pathway is a designated emergency vehicle lane. So we're not intending to have to use the roadway, that there's not sufficient room. And so this would be not only non-motorized pathway, but also the emergency vehicle lane. We would have to probably sign that or provide some indication to people that that's the case. And then again, we still feel that we need, we do need, even with a 4.5 foot shoulder, we do need some type of vertical separation. I want to make sure I go back to that document because I've had some description on there. I wanted to make sure we talk about all of the elements on that. Okay, so on the 3-lane option that we just went through, talk about may require a design exception for an 8-foot wide trail, but we believe there's good justification since we have an adjacent pedestrian sidewalk that full length. We're saying vertical separation through traffic delineators, maintains the full 3-lane section through the bridge, 11-foot center lane highly desirable by emergency services. And Chief Janik, you can weigh in if I say anything incorrect. North of bridge approach talks about the 10-foot separated trail behind the curb. So no change to the roadway up there. So this is the 2-lane option. Restripe roadway to provide 2-lane bridge crossing with 4.5 foot paved shoulders and greater separation from the non-motorized trail. Vertical separation also required, at least on the south approach, and still highly recommended through the bridge. Provides the full 14-foot non-motorized trail and designated emergency service vehicle lane, which would line up with the existing 14-foot path south of Washington. The south approach transitions back to 3 lanes for left turns on Washington Street. So that could be a potential problem if there's a lot of southbound traffic trying to turn left. That's a fairly short stacking, probably 3 cars that's available. And the same on the north. Okay, so that's pretty much it for those 2 alternatives. Do anybody have any comments, questions on this one? Yes.
This is John Adams. Could you talk a little bit more about what's driving the need for vertical separation on the 2-lane? I think you've talked about 5-foot separation. I guess we're within a 1/2 foot of that. Is it we're a 1/2 foot short, or it just seems odd? We're traveling right along in the one, the 3-lane versus 5 feet away. But yeah, what drives that opinion?
Well, it's because some information I'm going to pull up here. So it's got to do with the AASHTO guidelines regarding separation from a non-motorized trail. And so basically a paved shoulder is not considered part of the separation. So the separation distance begins at the outside edge of the shoulder. So thus a paved shoulder is not included as part of the separation distance. So I think I had mentioned before, this becomes a bit of a gray area. We don't have any option other than having pavement across this full bridge section. It's not like we can put a grass median strip in here. So it's kind of like a technical interpretation, and I'm going to the side of being conservative. Since on the south approach, we don't have that separation anyways, we're going to have delineators. So my thought is we probably should just continue that through the full bridge section. So we're going to get into that same discussion when we get north of Lake Street, where that 5-foot separation not being part of a paved shoulder comes into play. So I guess, does that address it very well, John?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so these are the 2 options that we have presented. It's really, for as far as the cost estimating goes right now, there's not a significant difference between the 2 that we didn't put a separate cost, because it's really a matter of pavement markings and removing pavement markings, placing pavement markings and delineators. And then the north approach, of course, the cost of the separated trail.
Okay, I see there's a lot of questions. Let me start with Ken.
Yeah, thanks. By the way, my video is flashing on and off because my internet is unstable here, so pardon me for that. Larry, just to be clear, on the option where you jump off of the roadway onto the sidewalk proceeding towards Lake Street, it looks like you'd have to remove all the trees along that stretch. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, those mature trees, yes. Not that you can't put a smaller tree back in or some other vertical landscape separation, but those trees would likely need to come out. And not only is it for the trail itself, but you can see on that sidewalk that trees and tree roots do not work well with sidewalks and paths. So it's kind of a twofold thing. But yes, something would have to happen with those existing trees are too mature to leave in place and too far back from that curb.
Are you saying the trees on both sides of the trail would have to be removed?
No, I'm saying the trees that are currently adjacent to the curb on the west side.
Okay.
In this space, but we do have room to plant something smaller or provide some, Holly can probably add some artwork or whatever to that. But landscaping, green space can still be put back there, but those large trees, yes, that's what we're planning.
Yeah, Ken lives in those condos right there, and I'm sure visually the idea of keeping some vegetation or some trees is important for views.
Yeah, so these trees that are on the top, I'm trying to envision, Ken, our walkthrough, are all the trees along the west side of what would be the trail within the top part before it goes down the slope. Are there any trees in that section, or is that all just grass?
I think it's mostly grass, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah,
there are trees that are growing there, but they may be farther down slope. I guess we'd have to look at that again.
We wouldn't have to go down the slope to take trees out, but we would have to clear to the edge of basically the embankment.
Yeah. Well, it goes along with Richard's previous comment. That and the delineators are going to be a major item of discussion amongst our folks. They ain't going to like it.
Well, the problem is that everybody's not going to get everything that they want. And in order, right now, even MDOT concedes that this is not a safe travel, a safe area to travel on a bike. So nobody's going to get everything they want, but we know that this is something that's important, the greenery view, and that's something that we can work on. So Kathy?
Yes, I don't really have a question, but I do have a comment. It just seems to me that the delineators are going to be a big issue, and they're not as aesthetically important. And I believe our two towns are all built around aesthetics, cuteness, and everything else to bring us our tourism. So with that said, and also I think that the 2-lane option, I want to ask Chief Janik about, but let me finish for a minute, because if the delineators are, we're still going to have some on the 2-lane, but not near to the point of the 3-lane. We also think it'd be safer to have more room for the bikers and other people. So that leaves us to the fire department. So I'd like to ask for Chief Janik, can we live with the 2-lane one and work around it? And if so, what are the solutions for that? Because that'll bring us the aesthetic look. And if you can't live with the 2-lane, I think, we can go with the 3. We need to get this done. No problem. But I'd like to hear the justification for a 3 and if there's any possibility at all for the 2. Is he on the line still?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So it's a very fair question, Kathy. I'll be candid with the group. There's no doubt that the firefighters, officers favor the 3-lane. Their feeling is they do not want to be commingled with a trail. They don't want to be going down a trail at any time. So that said, it reverts into a 3-lane because we feel we have a better chance of getting from point A to point B. We will certainly take cost into consideration. We will take aesthetics into consideration. So I don't want to say we are definitely only going to consider the 3-lane. There's definitely a favoritism for the 3-lane, but we will take the other items into consideration. My team, they're out in the field. They haven't had time to look at the approaches that engineering has so kindly done for us in front of the car. So we are going to give this thorough consideration, taking other things into consideration. But the 3-lane for us it just works better. The 2-lane we experienced going through Douglas now, we're having too many issues, but I'm not here to whine and complain. We'll look at the delineation. We will look at the cost factor and try to do the best, make the best decision we can. But I can't make that decision right now without talking with my command staff.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you. John Adams, did you want to weigh in? And Kathy, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, John?
My question relates to the, off-road section as you go south and you merge onto the pavement. How do you deal with the fact that you've got cars that are coming south and now you've got the trail coming on the road? How do we alert them to that and protect the trail users as the trail comes onto the road?
That's a fair question. I'm going to try and pull up Google Earth and we'll look at it a little closer. But you currently do have a taper lane, acceleration lane that ends at that same sector.
Right.
So delineators, again, chevrons type would most likely. Whoops. So this is the section we're talking about right here. Sorry, I'm gonna do this. Oops. Yeah, so it's past the guardrail section. Right, so basically the pavement marking and the whole lane configuration would have a large shift at this point. So to get back to, well, let's see. And these are the trees Ken was talking about. So at this point, it's not an issue because we are already at 3-lane. It's really, well, it is because we're shifting everything over. So I'm going to say with delineation at this point, that would guide you through that lane shift right here, that we're going to be taking up this 12-foot area and moving these over to the east.
Okay.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
Yeah, Holly, it's Richard. Just so we all understand, Larry, how would the emergency vehicles access the trail in the 2-lane scenario where they find themselves blocked going across the bridge?
So in the 2-lane scenario, that would be the dedicated emergency vehicle lane. So we've got, if we do use delineation to make this transition, then those are run over delineators, right? So that, I think that's what they have to do now, isn't it, Chief?
Larry, as far as running over the delineators, we don't do that now. If we have to enter the emergency for the trail, non-motorized trail in the Douglas area, we would enter it off of Main Street, drive over it that way, kind of a soft roll curb type situation.
Okay. We can look at that further. The FMV drawings, both of the alternatives that they had previously have that same lane shift, either 2-lane or 3-lane options. at that approach. Would you like me to call that up right now, Richard, or are we good for now?
No, that's good enough. I think I understand what you're saying. I just wanted to have that articulated.
Right. It's not like just a smooth, straight through in either option. Both of these require a pretty significant lane shift.
Kathy, did you have another question?
No, I never took my hand down. It's just stuck there, I guess. Nope.
Ryan, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, Kathy, you had made the comment that the 14-foot width would be a little bit safer. What did you mean by that comment? So I understand that.
Well, I just feel like 3 lanes is pushing all these shoulders and everything to be so small and so tight, even for the fire trucks and things to get through on that middle lane, that having just 2 gives everybody more room as long as there's a way for the fire department to get through. I believe that the cement barriers or plantings could work to separate and be much more aesthetically pleasing in the end. And I look at the future, 10, 20 years from now, we want something beautiful. I look at South Haven has that 2-lane bridge and their plantings. Somehow the people can navigate that. I'm not saying I'm only for the 2. Like I said, I really want this done. So I'm happy to go with the 3 if that's what it comes to. And that's the only thing that's safe. But I just think it's safer for the bikers, walkers, and children and everything to have a 2-lane. It seems like you have more room to work with.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else want to weigh in? No. Okay. Yeah. What I'm hearing is that the greenery, replacing those trees is important. We want to focus on the aesthetics of the delineators. And I'm hearing Chief say that they want 3-lane, but he's still willing to look at it. And Kathy is definitely wanting us to keep the second, the 2-lane in play for aesthetics. And Larry said there's not a significant cost difference between the 2 and the 3 lanes. So
No, I want to default to the fire chief on this. And if it's a preference only, all I'm saying is I don't want to keep it open for open sake. I mean, this needs to move on. And if everyone thinks the 3 lanes okay, I do too. I can live with it. And if that's really what will get this going, let's go with the 3-lane. But the chief sounded like it's just a preference. And if it's just a preference, I think the 2-lane would be more aesthetically pleasing. That's all. So I don't know if that means I want to keep it in play or I'm making a comment, but I'd like to hear from other people, I guess. Do they want to keep it in play?
I'd like to hear Larry cover option 3.
Okay. So option 3 that we listed in my description is not really an option on its own, because option 3 is just adding traffic signals to each of the intersections at the south and north ends of Washington Street and Lake Street. So in order to do that, that doesn't get you a bike path or any way to cross the bridge that's different from right now. All it does is add traffic signals. So my understanding of the previous thoughts about adding the traffic signals are that it could work with the 2-lane, or it could work with a 3-lane with a reduced center turn lane, so that the traffic signals are activated remotely by emergency services vehicles as they approach, or within a quarter mile or whatever, half mile, so that there is time for the vehicles to basically clear the bridge. Okay, so then there would be a traffic backup, of course, on Lake Street trying to get onto Blue Star Highway, a traffic backup southbound north of the bridge, traffic backup northbound south of the bridge. So obviously the emergency services vehicles would have to use the opposite lane in order to get onto the bridge. So though, to me, that is what I understand as the intent. It basically takes that 2-lane option or 3-lane with a reduced size center lane to make them more workable so that the emergency services vehicles have access across the bridge. So what I'm going to say is it doesn't change either of these two alternatives significantly. It may add an enhancement, but I will say that the traffic signals themselves are not fundable by TAP other than the portion that's directly related to the pedestrian crossing, which is a fairly small portion of that, of a traffic signal. So traffic signals are about $100,000 an intersection. So you'd be adding about $200,000 to either of these two alternatives or a slightly modified alternative in order to accomplish this. So, and then perhaps like 10% of that could be, eligible for funding. So to me, I think we can do a perfectly safe trail with either of the other two options that doesn't require traffic signals. Not that I don't think traffic signals could be important, but I think that's a separate issue unless you're willing to spend the $200,000 at this point, basically non-grant fundable to accomplish that same thing. Okay, there's no question in my mind that it can enhance the safety, improve the safety, but it's incremental over doing a well-designed trail in the first place. I mean, you still have to have that as your basis. The traffic signals are an enhancement to that.
Brian, you have a question?
My hand was still up, but just a comment. Well, it's a question. It's a question for Rich. And it kind of goes to the 2-lane option with possibly some plantings. And I know Douglas has struggled with maintenance of the plantings, and I just want to maybe touch on the reality of having nice plantings, but the maintenance that goes along with that. Rich, if you're still on the call, can you tell us about your experience in Douglas with that? He gone. I think there's been struggles there.
Jerry, are you on the call? Maybe you know something.
I am. So just as you come south across the bridge, one of the things we did was remove the bump out. I called it the camel hump to make it a more streamlined approach. The plantings just simply take up too much vital pavement that serves a whole lot of purposes. I'm for beautification as much as the next person, but we're talking the main thoroughfare through town. So to put plantings in the middle of the road or on the side of the road for beautification, it is just not functional. And Ryan, you bring up a good point. I mean, we're constantly maintaining them and planting and trying to take care of them. So there's that issue as well. And I mean, I look at it as we go south and you get in front of St. Peter's, we've got 7-8 feet of plantings right there on the right-hand side, which if those weren't there, I think Chief Janik would have a much more efficient and streamlined way of navigating that. And I mean, so I understand beautification. I get it. It's just right here. I don't know that it's really applicable.
Thanks, Jerry. Brenda?
I'm on, I think, yes. I would like to ask both Craig, Chief Janik and Craig.
Can't hear it.
Can't hear you, Brenda.
You can't?
Okay, that's better.
Oh, I didn't do anything. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm wondering if a stoplight could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because as the chief knows and as Craig knows, we're dealing with a lot of complaints about safety on Blue Star Highway for residents. And we talked about a light either at Lake or Allegan, but we think one at Lake would slow traffic enough that it might help the problems with these things. So I just wanted your input on that, both Greg and Craig.
Greg and Craig. Got
Yeah.
it.
Holly,
Go
may I
ahead, Craig.
speak on that? Holly?
Yes, please, Greg, go ahead. Chief, go ahead.
Another good question. I like the whole light aspect. I relate to Larry's comments. Do I think it would enhance the project? Yes. What I don't like about it are two issues. The cost for whomever is going to pay for it, $200,000. I'd rather see an upgrade to maintenance-free bridges. That's me. The other aspect is there may be a day when we need a traffic light at Old Allegan Blue Star. What's the impact to that? I would rather try to make this work without, number one, the cost of the lights, and I don't want to preclude the possibility of adding lights at Old Allegan Blue Star. So I hope that provides an adequate answer, but I reserve all judgment. And again, I like the traffic lights. I'd have to say, no, let's not spend the money.
Craig, can you weigh in?
Sure, yeah, we've talked about this before. A signal at Lake Street would definitely impact Old Allegan and the flow of traffic there. And I've talked to Ryan, and I'm trying to finish up this RFP to get it out, to do a traffic study, a traffic engineering study there to kind of incorporate both those intersections and see, would it be better at one or the other? Is a signal even meet any warrants? Is that what the proper solution is?
Mhm.
So that's kind of a part of a bigger discussion. I don't know, my thought is the same as has been mentioned, $200,000 for, I don't know how often the emergency services has to use the bridge there and how that would work, but it would definitely impact things in the area for sure. So I would wait till we get our engineering study done to see what the results of that are.
Okay.
I guess I'm going.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes, go ahead, Brenda.
I can't speak for my board unless they, they'd have to approve and weigh in on this, but I'm pretty sure that we would definitely contribute to this, given the accident. So whether, or just the danger, so whether or not we do it with this or down the road after the study, I think it's something that's going to have to happen, and I think that we will contribute. That's all I want to say.
Or Old Allegan and Blue Star.
Either one.
Yeah, Craig, thank you.
Yes.
We're really glad that you're doing that RFP and that the county's going to look at, do a traffic engineering study for both of those spots. Thank you. Richard, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, please. A couple of things. One, I think, Larry, where I see this can be helpful is to address the concerns that the fire department has with the two-lane option. They're reluctant to go onto the trail and use that as an alternate way across the bridge. And I understand there's been at least one incident where that resulted in some issues. The idea, I think, is that a traffic signal there would alleviate that concern with the two-lane option. So it makes the two-lane option more viable. And the two-lane option does have other advantages, as Kathy mentioned. Another thing I had was a question. You said we need two lights, one at Lake and one at Washington. Do you really need two on both sides? If you had one at Lake and you stopped the traffic coming southbound on Lake, doesn't that open up a whole lane for the fire vehicles to get across? And then finally, I would ask, that we're probably not the first community to ever have to look at this. Have you looked at, or Emily looked at other situations in Michigan or around the country where communities face this kind of situation, getting across a bridge, And how did they deal with emergency vehicle concerns? I think Kathy mentioned South Haven was one. And I guess I'd ask Chief Janik too. I know, Greg, you're very well connected in the fire department community. Have you talked to any of your colleagues? How do they handle it? Has this come up in other towns?
Yes, Richard, thank you for that. I have actually reached out to Chief Brandon Heinz about this, and he had some strong opinions about the pavement markings. Just as you were speaking, I was sending him an email to revisit this. He did not like the pavement markings. He was not in favor of it, but let me get details and I'll report back to this body at the next meeting.
Thanks, Chief. Larry, could you weigh in on some of Richard's concerns?
Yes, I'll try to. So, yeah, perhaps I didn't fully understand the concept that you guys were thinking in terms of the traffic signal, only one at Lake Street. My understanding was you were talking about two. So potentially it could work. The only thing being you've got a 2-lane section of roadway where you've got so the southbound on Blue Star Highway is going to be backed up, right? It's going to stop at a traffic light. That's the only option to clear the bridge. Okay, and it's a 2-lane section just north of, a little ways past Lake Street. And so then you're still going to have oncoming traffic from northbound traffic that will still be in that right lane. Likewise, the Lake Street side is going to be backed up at the light, depending on how much traffic is there, and depending on how long it takes people or takes the emergency vehicles to get there. So that's the potential conflict I see with just having one signal is you've still got some northbound traffic, southbound traffic is fully stopped. And so does that allow you to get onto the bridge? Once you're on the bridge, you can get in the lane that's been stopped and that's clear. But the lane that's northbound still has traffic in it, if that makes sense. So, even if you did one signal, which at Lake Street obviously makes the most sense, you're still talking about $100,000 adding to enhance option 2. So we could do that, and we could put in the cost analysis, put that $100,000 in option 2. If that were your choice to proceed with that. I personally do not have experience with a situation exactly like this. Emily may have seen this before, but it's not a usual circumstance. I mean, you've been to other communities too. They have the same issue. Sometimes if our very wealthy community, they can put a separated bridge. I mean, for pedestrians, but that's pretty unlikely.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of funding to go around, and that's a pretty expensive proposition.
Let me go to Ryan, back to Chief Janik and Richard and Kent. Ryan?
Thanks, Holly. Real quick, and I apologize if this has already been discussed and dismissed or is possibly included, but has there been a discussion about rapid flashing beacons at these roads? That would be Maple, Allegan, and Lake Street. And
there has not. The difficulty with the rapid flashing beacons is that they're made more for a mid-block crossing. So if we were going to be crossing the Blue Star Highway away from an intersection, that's typically where you would use a rapid rectangular flashing beacon, the RFB, or the Hawk signal, or those types of devices. Where we're at an intersection that's stop controlled already, I don't know that it adds an awful lot.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Greg, I don't know. Greg might have stepped out for a minute. Richard, what else did you want to add?
Well, I get the impression, Larry, that you guys really haven't looked at the issue of how a traffic signal would work here, and whether I frankly think it's more than just an enhancement. I think it could make a major difference. And I would urge you to look at it and, do more research in whether this approach has been used in other places. I'd also ask that you check with your traffic engineers about how the flow would actually work if there was a signal. F&V did look at that a little bit, but I don't think they ever completed their work, but the initial feedback we were getting was pretty positive. And then lastly, I just note in terms of the cost, we are under the impression that CMAQ money, congestion mitigation and air quality money, might be available for something like this, which is, I understand, is funded through the county. It may not be available this year or next year, but it may be available by the time we'd actually be doing construction. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the communities or the friends are going to have to write a check.
Richard, CMAQ money can be used for installing new signals. It would only be used for upgrading signals.
I'm sorry, Craig, it cannot be?
Not for new signal installations. It can be used for upgrading an existing, like a timed signal to a live, I can't remember what the technical term is, like one with a camera system that would adapt to traffic, a signal upgrade.
Okay, I stand corrected then.
Let me go back to Chief Janik and then to Ken and
Yeah,
Ryan.
Holly, let me just correct some of the information that's been provided here.
Okay.
First of all, Fleiss and Vandenbrink did complete a traffic study at Lake Street and Blue Star and did not recommend installing a light. Now, that was some time ago and things may have changed. So we're anxious for the County Road Commission to revisit that, to look at, as Craig described, his study is going to look at both intersections, I believe, and come up with some recommendations for us. And I welcome that. Secondly, F&V, when they presented all this to us, estimated the cost of the traffic light at and Blue Star alone was $250,000. So I just wanted that information on the record.
All right, thank you, Ken. Chief Janik?
I hope you all will excuse me. I'm on borrowed time here. I've got to sign off. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for your attendance today, Chief. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Ryan?
Yeah, real quick, in regards to Richard's request, I can't remember the scope of work for Larry's group, but I do recall that possibly it did clearly exclude the study of a traffic light and traffic study. But Larry, you can help me out with that. So if we're asking him to do that, depending on Larry's answer, I think that would be a change of scope.
Well, yes, if we were to do a full traffic study, I can reach out to a traffic signal company or traffic engineering company and have a discussion with them. But I probably would want Richard involved because I'm not grasping exactly what it is he believes the importance of it is, or the enhancement of. I understand it allows the 2-lane section and not use the bike path. And so that's great. I think I fully endorse doing a traffic study of both those intersections. And I think probably by the time the traffic study was done, we could have information for design that could change it. And I don't think it would change the funding picture for the grant, but we can do that if the group thinks that that's important. I'm not trying to deflect that. We didn't include a traffic signal study analysis of the intersection in our scope, but we did present that we have a team partner that does do traffic engineering. So,
thank you.
Okay, Richard.
Real quick, Holly. Sorry, I was not suggesting that C2 needed to conduct a traffic study themselves. I just meant analyzing the whole effect of the trail on the traffic pattern at Lake Street in order to come up with a safe and pleasing, aesthetically pleasing solution, et cetera. That's all I meant. And Larry, could I just ask one quick question too? What do you see that a signal there and the ability of the emergency responders to control it, could that eliminate the need for delineators?
I don't believe it significantly changes either option. So let me pull that back up. I'm sorry. So it doesn't get us any more. So say things are just operating normally. Traffic's flowing out normally and bikes and pedestrians are using the bridge. It doesn't change any of these configurations by having a traffic signal. So we still have a 4.5 foot shoulder, 11-foot lane, 4.5 foot shoulder. And then on the south approach, we still have 3 lanes that have no real separation other than this 1 foot plus 2 foot clear zone. So it doesn't change that. So we still have a reduced separation issue, even with the 2 lane, whether there's a traffic signal there or not. The only thing I could think, and it doesn't hinge on a traffic signal, is if you really didn't want the delineators on the bridge section for the 2 lane, we could propose to MDOT that we have 5 feet with just pavement marking, or 5.5 feet with just pavement marking, and see if that flies. But that really doesn't have anything to do with the traffic signal.
Okay. Emily, did you want to weigh in, Emily?
I did. I just wanted to talk a little bit. I know that it's pretty evident no one likes traffic delineators, and I can understand that they're not real attractive, I think, when we just think about how they've been used. But I was listening to what Holly was saying about being an artist community, and maybe there's an opportunity to have like a grant or something to get artists to come up with new ideas that would be unique, make a unique type of traffic delineator. Maybe they have sailboats, or maybe they do something that identifies with the community, and I don't know what that is, but maybe it's a separate grant, like an art grant that you could put out to try to get something unique and creative just for your community. And try to just think outside the box. Like, how can we think outside the box to solve this problem of these ugly traffic delineators? Because maybe we can make them look nice.
Yeah, I can tell you Bloomberg Philanthropies has an asphalt art grant that they will actually pay for murals in the roadway. So I think that's something that we should look at. And these delineators do come in a full rainbow of colors. I mean, I do think that there are some design opportunities. I mean, we have to look at it as a problem, as an opportunity, and we have to brand it with Saugatuck. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, it was just a thought too. I wanted to just say, and you know, like looking at the best configuration for all the users of the bridge, which includes emergency services, and then how can we make the best solution out of that? So.
Yeah. Cindy.
I think you should make them look like paint brushes, with the brushes up, and have different colors of paint on the brush.
That's a super fun idea, and I like it. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, that was a great conversation. This bridge design is not an easy conversation, but I think we had a substantial conversation today. Larry?
I guess, Holly, so as far as the 2 alternatives that are presented, would we take both of these to the public information meeting and gain public input on them? That's kind of where we're at.
Feedback?
Larry, when you say 2, you mean the 3 lane and the 2 lane?
Yeah, if you would like, I mean, so to me, again, if option, we could add option 3, which I think you're suggesting would be 2 lane with a traffic signal. Is that right, Richard?
Yes, I guess that's right.
I mean, we can leave that in there, yes, and we can do a separate cost opinion for that and include that.
I think that the public open house would be a good opportunity to solicit public feedback on the desirability of having a light, at least at Lake Street.
I mean, the public is always interested in talking about, in my experience, I get a lot of feedback from people about lights either at Allegan or at Lake Street. So I think the fact that Craig is doing a study and we're just going to keep the discussion of lights in play, I think that's just an important, thing to let people know. We can't answer that question right now necessarily, but as Craig said, we can take his results. That gives us some data that we can use possibly while we're in the design phase.
I have a question on whether we take both to the public or, the third one and the first one or whatever. If we go to the public, and I'm not, sure, but they're going to want to say, how did you think of this? Did you think of that? And this kind of thing has been going on for 2 engineering firms and so on for 2 to 3 years or more now. So won't that complicate it to take a bunch of plans in? Is it better this committee pins this stuff down and takes one plan in that we can hash out and fine tune and hear? Or is it better to take more than one? I'd like to ask other people's opinions.
I guess this is John. I'll weigh in. I agree with you, Kathy. I think it's often better to just make it simple, and we can talk about the process and things that we reviewed. My concern in this case is with the 3-lane, we're taking some risk with MDOT because it's not AASHTO compliant. And I guess my question would be, let's say we take the 2-lane off the plate and we haven't even reviewed it in public. What happens if we hit a dead end on the grant application on the 3-lane? And maybe Larry could speak to that. So, I mean, I'm thinking of having a backup, so to speak. If we run into a dead end, I don't want to have the whole project thrown out or maybe have another year delay in the grant process.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
But I don't know if that's true. I mean, Larry, maybe you comment on that.
Emily, why don't you help with this one? That's a very good question, John. So yeah, go ahead, Emily.
Actually, it's a really good point. It would be good probably to have public feedback on both options. So if we have to revert back to one, we could say we did get feedback already. And so I don't think it would hurt. Typically, it is nice to just have one option to go forward with, but on this section, because there's been so much discussion, I don't think it hurts, actually. I think, we could record all the public comment. We could get feedback. It might change all of your opinion on where to go. And it might also help sway the grant one way or the other.
Works for me. Anybody else? Brenda?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, just regarding public comment, I wonder if how we phrase the feedback we're expecting, if that would affect, we don't want people coming in with all these plans and changing everything, but we do want their opinion. So I just wonder if there's a way to phrase that would kind of keep them in the corral, just an idea. But we do want their feedback.
Yes. Do we need to, can we move into that section of our agenda, or Larry, do you need to finish any more presentation of roadway designs or trail designs?
I think this section is kind of important to quickly look at.
Okay.
All right, so this is now between Lake Street and Maple Street. So this is still in the city of Saugatuck. So I don't know if any of you have walked this or really gotten out and looked at this, but again, we've got a very steep embankment close to the roadway, a short section of guardrail. It's 2-lane to 3-lane at Lake Street. So it's not a simple separated path. So we have 2 options here, and I'm sorry if I'm taking too long, Holly, but So we have two options shown here, and I know this drawing is a little confusing about what option goes, what's really an option and what's not. So the two on the left are one option. Then the top right is the second option. The bottom right is just a typical cross section that applies to the north section because of an opposite embankment as opposed to a drop off. So there's not proposing an option for this one. So for this section, the fully MDOT compliant option would be this at grade boardwalk. So we're leaving the roadway as it is. We're going with MDOT's 5 foot of separation from the edge of the paved shoulder per the standards I just showed you a bit ago. And then having a 10-foot motorized path and 2-foot clear zone, which basically then we have a boardwalk that's matching grade on one side and then elevated on the other. And obviously guardrail on the drop-off side. So this is the fully compliant option. It's also a very expensive option. These boardwalks, as we know, are not cheap. So a second option to this, it's the same option, it's only different in pricing, is that rather than timber boardwalk, we construct a sheet pile retaining wall on this side. We still have to have a rail, and we have a cap on that sheet pile. And then we have, this is filled, and construct a normal paved trail here. So it's the same alternative, it's the same distances. I just throw that out there because we did a cost opinion difference. And so to go to the permanent sheet pile is probably about a 20% add in cost, but it's something I don't want to rule out because potentially, maintenance is less on a sheet pile retaining wall and steel rail as opposed to a timber boardwalk. So just keep that in mind. These are, again, for discussion. So this is the fully compliant MDOT option, AASHTO option. The other option is for the guardrail section, which is just a short distance north of Lake Street. I'll show you right here. So this section here with the guardrail has to be relocated. We have two options in guardrail design. One is to be back away from the roadway a certain distance, or the other is to be at the face of curb. You don't have a mix in between. Either you're a certain distance back or you're at the face of the guardrail, or face of the curb. So in this situation, we have curb already there. We place the guardrail, and we have a shortened separation area. So what we're trying to do here is to limit how far out this embankment we're going, if at all. So from going to the boardwalk section, you can see we're kind of hanging out over this embankment a fair distance. And this is, I'm sorry, it didn't show up, but this is like 28 feet or 26 feet from this edge of the paved lane line. This option shortens that. I think it's 25 feet. Tyler, if you can quickly take a look, maybe you can't from where you're at, but this just got blacked out. I think it's 25. So this is our attempt to reduce our costs by reducing the offset distance and not having to go as far down the embankment. There will still be some areas where some retaining wall would be required. If you go north of the guardrail section, we're still doing basically a reduced width of separation from pavement. So what we're doing here is basically adding curb and gutter. So we're cutting the lane at the lane line. We're removing all of that paved shoulder. Okay, we're adding a curb and gutter. So we're trying still to be, comply with AASHTO standards, which either require 11-foot lane, a 12-foot lane. We get part of the lane in here, and in this section, an 8-foot paved shoulder or curb and gutter. So those are the AASHTO standards for the roadway. So this then is our attempt at a shortened offset distance and still providing a vertical separation. So we get some vertical separation from this curb, but then also potentially adding a delineator here. So again, we're gaining maybe 6-7 feet, pushing back towards the roadway, which obviously impacts our costs. So that's what this option is compared to the boardwalk option, at-grade boardwalk or retaining wall. Okay, and you notice that in the cost estimate, there's a fair difference in the cost. Oops, I must have closed that mistakenly. Okay. So these are where the program we use it's a MERL, it's a standard MDOT estimating program. It's not real easy to show alternatives. So the alternative here is labeled as category 2, Lake Street to Maple alternate median section. So this is the one we just talked about by reducing the offset and adding curb and gutter. So that's about $600,000. And then if we were to go to the at-grade boardwalk, we're talking about $675,000. So more cost. And then if we add 20% onto that, if we go to retaining wall, we're talking another 130,000. So. All right, so now I'm looking for feedback on those or questions about exactly what the heck I just talked about.
We can't hear you, Holly.
Sorry. John?
Yeah, I was just going to express a concern. These numbers, I think either of these plans cost-wise are substantially above, the prior numbers that we've seen. And, Larry has been very helpful in answering the reasons, why the design is what it is. But it is a concern. And just, if you've looked at the numbers, the boardwalk's a $500,000 boardwalk, the retaining wall is a $300,000 retaining wall. That raises concerns for us as the Friends in terms of what that means for the local match and dollars. And hopefully we'll find out more about that shortly. And obviously it's going to have to be maintained. So I guess that leads to my question. And Larry, you may not like this, but we found that there often is another way. It may involve different trade-offs or issues. But is there another way? And, perhaps the other way is to push MDOT somewhat in the letter of their requirements, similar to what we're doing on the bridge. Might that be successful and might it be worthwhile? Because we're talking about, big dollars here for this section that were unanticipated.
Yeah, that's a decision that you can make and propose to MDOT what we think is reasonable, and cost can be a factor, although they like not to say cost is a factor. So again, we could go to an 8-foot section here, and propose that. I can bring up the previous F&V option for this area. They had one that was, did I move? They had one that was very similar to this with retaining wall. So that was one of their options. The other one they had was basically to take the paved shoulder and count that as our separation and put in pavement markings and rumble strips, which again, John, is kind of like a trade-off. And we talked about it before, you're trying to be AASHTO compliant where you can. And so you can propose it, and we can propose a reduced width section there. We can propose using the shoulder as part of the separation. But again, you're now you're taking a little more risk about, what will be funded and will they accept it? I don't know how better to answer that. Emily, looks like you aren't ready.
I was just gonna add, my experience with MDOT, they honestly don't care so much about the cost they won't. So the difference is on the bridge is limited in the width of where you can actually put a trail. Where in this case, my opinion is they will say you need to be AASHTO compliant. They won't, they don't like being asked for an exception. They usually don't accept it. I think that's a different story on the bridge because it's a bridge. And the only other solution that we could find is, maybe putting a separate bridge up. So, that would be an option with cost not mattering. But I think in this case, I do not believe MDOT would approve an exception. But, you can always ask.
Are the shoulders in this area standard width, or is there extra room compared to a normal road of this nature?
No, so I do have that too. No, these comply with AASHTO as they are. So if you we can't technically reduce the width of the shoulder in those areas without being out of compliance on the roadway portion.
I guess one more question since I got you. What about the ability to get around the sign? That's another kind of hot point. Any issues there?
Certainly issues, and it's going to take, I think conceptually looking at the previous more detailed stuff that F&V had, I think we can accomplish it with either one of these options. We will have to go behind the guardrail here. But potentially in front of the sign, there could be room, or even Holly and I looked at it potentially through the sign and still stay within the planting raised area is a possibility. So we will create a detail that goes along with the submittal for that. So I think it can be accomplished, yes.
That was Ryan's idea to go under the sign, which I thought was pretty smart. All right, any other questions? We really should keep moving because we're at 2 hours. Yes. Yep.
I just want to point out, I'm sure that our city council is going to be interested in knowing what the maintenance, potential maintenance cost on this infrastructure would be. That was a big concern the first time around when we first considered this. I'm not saying that it would preclude approval of this thing, but I think we'd want to go into it with our eyes wide open on this one.
For sure. I think all of the communities are interested in maintenance. That's an issue for all 3 communities, so it's nothing to sneeze at. I hear you. Anybody else?
Okay, I think we've been through all of the alternatives. I'll bring this up then, and I can send this to you, Holly, for distribution after. Okay. Everybody has to take this as very draft because the cost estimates are not fully refined either, but we just presented a couple of options here for your consideration and just kind of general overall picture. So on the left, this is taking all of the project costs together and basically assuming a 50% TAP grant and 2 trust fund grants, one for the city of Saugatuck and one for Saugatuck Township. I think Emily and I have brought that up a couple of other times, is that depending on the costs, that may make sense. And we've done that successfully in other communities where individual entities that are eligible can apply for the same trust fund funding for the same trail. We say 50% TAP because that is probably a very competitive number. You get above 50% and you become less competitive. So we can talk more about that, but we've given a couple options here. So the maximum trust fund grant is $300,000. That hasn't changed. And so this column is 50% TAP, $300,000 to $300,000 trust fund grant. So the total project construction costs, and we took the more expensive option for Lake to Maple to include in here just for starting out, is $1.825 million. And that asterisk means the costs that you saw on that sheet are not inflated with a contingency, which in this climate of bidding and cost revisions and stuff, we need to build in some contingency, because you don't want to get 2 or 3 years down the road when this thing's actually going to be bid and find yourself, well short. So right now we've included the cost that you see in the other sheet and added 15% to those. And then also put in a pretty standard estimating cost of 15% for engineering. So the total project cost then becomes $2.1 million. The TAP grant does not fund engineering, does not participate in engineering. They fund construction. So we took 50% of the construction cost, the top line here, the 1.825 million. Trust fund does fund engineering up to 15%. So that is not exclusive. This can be applied anywhere in the project, and typically it gets applied towards the engineering, or the local share does, because you're covering what TAP won't. So if we have 50% of the construction, that's $912,500. We have 2 trust fund grants, that's $600,000. So out of a $2.1 million project, that does leave a local share cost of almost $600,000. All right. We did break it down because of the 2 jurisdictions where we think would make sense to apply for 2 different trust fund grants, one being the city of Saugatuck. So that's just taking that section. It does include the Douglas portion of the bridge, but up to Maple Street, and gives you the breakdown of that. And then also the Saugatuck Township section, same thing, gives you the breakdown of that. These 2 together get added up into this total. All right. On the right part of this, we assume a 60% TAP grant. And so same, all calculations and numbers, it reduces the local share down to about $400,000. I don't know if those are mind-blowing numbers or lower than expected or what they are, but that's where we're at currently with the, again, preliminary. Does this make sense to everybody in terms of how we presented it? I'm not asking if it makes sense on the numbers. I'm just saying, and how we put this together.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Okay, and so Holly, I'll send this to you after the meeting, and then you can distribute it.
Okay.
We will want to refine this for public, but it's a good starting point.
Okay, John.
Yeah, I was just going to add, we've had, obviously a lot of discussions with the grant coordinator from TAP. And, you always get kind of MDOT speak, but she has suggested 35 to 40%, total local match in those discussions, which hopefully would leave it open to your, bigger MDOT contribution, because that number is less shocking than the other.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
I
Okay,
just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that local share on there means it could be, directly from a local government. It could be fundraising. It could be other grants that you locally apply for. So that's just a lump sum for everything that's not the TAP or trust fund.
okay. Thank you. Can we move on to talk about the public information meeting open house?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't have any presentation, so I'm going to quit sharing.
Okay. So I had several suggestions from the committee for venues, public, private, nonprofit. Isabel's was the most receptive. They had the most technology options. They're very bike friendly. They have the bike repair station. They want to, they hope to be be on the trail. They invite bikers. They're offering their space free of charge as a community service. We have the choice of a Zoom feed or a Facebook Live feed, which increases the number of eyeballs. They're stocked with microphones, projectors. They have a huge screen. They will provide complimentary soft drinks and even a cash bar, which have you met us? That's always great for a Saugatuck event. And I mean, basically they're used to hosting the Rotary meetings twice a month. So they've kind of got this down. So I think it's well lit. I think it's a good venue. So tentatively we're looking at August 24th, 4 to 6 p.m. And that's what's up with that. Any comments on that? Okay, and then review next steps. We covered a lot of ground today. Thank you, everybody. Larry, do you want to meet in a week? In 2 weeks to distill this? Do you want to get back to me in the beginning of the week? How do you want to proceed?
Okay, before I forget, I think we should talk a little bit about the open house. And Emily and I have, recently done presentation of, it wasn't a trail, but it was a similar type project in Elk Rapids. And we've done these several times, but we do think we get better results when we do an open house format, which is probably Tyler, Emily, and myself all manning, that's probably the wrong term now, posted at a station, and people come up and it all have all the drawings and the cost estimates and all of the information. And then people come up and have discussions with us, ask their questions. And then there's like a feedback form when they leave that, they provide their public input. They can do it either to us and we try to capture that. And we can have, one of you that's at each station as well that maybe is capturing some of that information and then collecting information, as opposed to a public hearing type presentation to everyone asking questions. We find that sometimes negative people can really dominate those. And we'll have that type of forum when we go to each individual municipality and attend their meetings, because that's how they're normally conducted. So that's just our suggestion. We'd like you to let us know what you think about that, because we don't want to surprise you and give you something totally different from what you're anticipating.
That sounds reasonable to me. Richard?
Yeah, just I assume the answer to this, but Emily, I take it MDOT doesn't really care. As long as we're doing a public hearing of some kind, they don't care what the forum is. And do they want to see any kind of results? Like, do they want to see a survey or any kind of written comments about what people said or that sort of thing?
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. They want to see that you've reached out. And well, one, you've done a lot of public input over time. I think it's really important to notify adjacent property owners and make sure they've been invited and they're aware of the project and they have time to comment. That's really important. MDOT does not like to be surprised when they go to approve a project and have people calling and yelling at them for approving a project that someone was against. Not that everyone has to be for it. They just want to see that people have been asked for input. And then if you do have a real particular problem area, let's say there's one property owner and there's a huge problem with landscaping, like they have landscaping in the road right of way, they want to see how you mitigated that. So the next step would be, like, through this process, if we found there's a couple hot spots, what we then did, the next steps to mitigate that. And maybe that's meeting with individual property owners on site if we have to, things like that. So that's what they do want to see. That we would keep record of the information we get back. We would include that in the grant because they want that written. I would see this as the initial way to reach out to property owners. That doesn't mean, that's just the first step. Before we submit the grant, I would see we'd be going to each of the 3 governments and actually doing a presentation and presenting that to the boards who would then approve it. And at that time you can have, that would be more of like your formal public hearing. But they don't actually require a public hearing, but they do require the boards to support the project.
Okay. That's helpful.
Emily, I think you mentioned before too, it would be helpful so to record or document how they've reached out to like invite people to the open house. So if you do a mailing to anybody that lives along there, or you know where you've advertised and like your flyer and having it posted on the community's websites, you know, those kinds of things. So documenting that you've actually attempted to get people to attend this.
Exactly. They would want to see that. We don't have to send them the list, but we would say we notified every property owner. I often use 300 feet because that's the zoning, you know, standard in zoning, 300 feet. So I've used that just because it's easy and you can say that's why you use it. You notified everyone within 300 feet. But it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to tell them who you did. It's just how you notified people. And then their comments. So they want to, you know, probably a written, you know, record of comments, which we could also provide through the feedback forms. I like the idea of the open house. A secondary piece of that is I'd like to see each of the governments maybe save the maps and let the public know that they can still look at those up to a certain date and provide that same feedback form that people could then leave at City Hall, and you could forward them to us and we could include that in the feedback loop. It just gives people who can attend a little bit more time to provide input.
And I'd suggest if we're going to do the 24th, that would give them like only a week to get it in by like the end of August, something like that. That makes sense. Because we do then have to turn that around and then have our presentations to each government, which is going to be, you know, time consuming and take up September. So.
Yeah, and let's, we need to talk to the township. They meet less. So we need to.
Yeah, once a month. Yeah.
Schedule. So. All right. Okay.
Okay. So to go back to your original question about meeting again. Yes, I think we definitely need to meet again before the open house. I'm not available next Friday. I'm going to be on vacation next week. But if you wanted to meet as a committee and discuss things without our presence, that's certainly something you should consider. If you think that would gain better feedback or input, or otherwise we can schedule one for the following week.
Let's schedule in, I think 2 weeks sounds fine, because we, you know, this was very, you know, I feel like we covered a lot of ground today. We got a lot of work done and we need to sort of fill in some blanks a little bit. So let's go ahead and do that. I don't really find any value to just talking without the engineers. We've been doing that for years, to be honest. We might as well, you know, ask questions about AASHTO standards and what's acceptable and what's not, and just, you know, take what we've said today and further develop something for August 24th. And then when we can get together constructively and sort of winnow some more things and ask questions. So Ken, go ahead.
You're on mute.
Ken, you're on mute. Ken.
There.
There.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I'm going to be out of state for a family affair on the 13th, just so you know. I'll be unable to attend.
Okay, well, I will fight for your trees, Ken. And I'll stick to the making the delineators not too plentiful. I hear you. All right, anybody else? All right, let's plan on meeting in 2 weeks then, and I'll follow up with everybody.
Okay, and Holly, if I can just do a quick recap, I make sure I understand the expectations is, so on the bridge, we'll keep the 2 alternative as they are. I will have a discussion with a traffic and engineering firm about the signal and then potentially have a third option that has the 2-lane with a signal attached to it. Then I think to go back to John's question or talk about the boardwalk section and the cost from Lake to Maple. We've been through so many options internally with that. I just want to give you the feeling we're really trying to come up with additional alternatives, but we're also trying to stay as compliant as possible. So we'll look at that again, but I can't promise you anything. Then the third thing is on the north section in the township, we will break the 66th Street portion into 2 alternatives, one being shared use roadway and one being maintaining the separated trail.
Okay.
Does that cover everything from everybody's memory?
Yes.
And also, Larry, if you can send around examples of delineators that you think might be suitable.
Okay, all right. And then right after this meeting, I'm going to send that initial funding draft. Okay.
I wanted to just ask one question. So with the open house, are the 3 governments going to then contact the property owners? I just wanted to make sure it would that would happen.
How do we usually handle that, Cindy and Ryan?
Cindy. I've never had to do it here in Saugatuck, but I mean, typically we'll have a list of the addresses within 300 feet and we'd send out a mailing.
It would be similar to how we did the milfoil notice.
Do we just send out like a postcard or?
It would be probably a letter with some graphics on it.
Okay.
Yeah, or you could have like you could include the press release, or just something that there's an open house. It doesn't have to be a formal letter like you would do in a zoning, but just whatever I guess you're comfortable with sending out. It could just be a flyer about the event.
When does it need to go out?
I think a reasonable amount of time before. Again, there's no law that says one way or the other. I would think you'd want to give people at least a week before, if not more.
Maybe I could draft something up and bring it to the meeting on the 13th and then send it out on the following Monday.
Okay, and I can help with that too, Cindy.
Good.
It would be nice if all
Good, because I don't have a lot of extra time.
I can, yeah. I'll work up something and send it to you. So, all right. All right. Anything else? Can we? Yes.
I defer to the elected officials and the managers, but are we working on that interlocal agreement if indeed that is a concern?
Yep.
We are.
The managers are. Okay. All right. I think Venetian needs to officially start if nobody has any other questions.
Well, you have public.
Public. Oh gosh, so sorry. Do we have any general public comments at this time? No. Okay. Do we have any committee member closing comments at this time? Nope. Okay. If there's nothing else, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make it.
Second.
Okay, Kathy, seconded by Richard Donovan. Brenda Marcy, I think she's gone already. Kathy?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Jerry had to go. John Adams?
Yes.
And Richard Donovan?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. That was a huge meeting. We got a lot done. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great
Great
weekend.
weekend.
Bye-bye.